All right. We are going to get started for tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming and joining us. In a second, I will introduce myself too, but I want to make sure that you are in the right session. So today we're talking about social and emotional learning. 3 single letters, 1 big impact, and really looking at how are we as Round Rock ISD helping students process emotions that they may be having, but also how can you as adults do that very same thing? Because we know that in order for our children to show up as their true, authentic, whole selves, adults in their lives need to do that as well. So we'll spend a little bit of time kind of talking about 2 different worlds, right? The student learning world, but also that adult practitioner. How do I kind of be my best person every single day? Before we get started, we will use the Q&A feature today. So if you have any questions, you want more information on something, or you want me to follow up with you on something, you are more than welcome to put that in the Q&A section. I am going to ask you to kind of do some different things for me, and I'll ask you to do that in the chat at different times, and we'll do one of those activities here in a second. So just know that those are 2 ways that we'll kind of talk through today. If by any chance you need to pop out for a little bit, or you have kiddos that need your attention for a little bit, please feel free to go take care of any of your needs. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the Future Readiness website. So if you're like, oh, I missed that, like 20 minutes of Rochelle's presentation, it's okay. It'll be posted online at a different time as well. So you can always go back to it as well if you need to. So before we get started, I want to give myself an opportunity to introduce myself to you. My name is not Future Readiness. My name is Rochelle Fink. I am proud to serve as the coordinator of social emotional learning in Round Rock ISD. But a couple of things about me that you might be interested in is the fact that this is my 14th year in education. Beyond that, I have been a professional school counseling. I actually have a master's in professional counseling. So I come to social and emotional learning both from an educator teaching background, but also from a mental health standpoint as well, which makes our approach to social emotional learning a little bit different than some school districts in the surrounding areas. I will always come to the table with a conversation in that dichotomous place, right? As a teacher, my skill set was very different than my skill set as a middle school and high school counselor. Serving the mental health needs of very at-risk populations and the things that we know our kids may need, especially right now in the time of COVID and the time of social isolation and just things that they may be processing through, but also understanding that the majority of my career has been in middle school when we know that hormones do some funky things to our emotions. And that's kind of where my skill set really lies, is kind of helping kids through the tangled web, or the tangled spaghetti plate of hormones, emotions, and peer groups, if you will. So that's kind of my passion and my jam. I have been the coordinator of social emotional learning for the last 4 years. But I think the number one thing that I am most proud of is for the last almost 4 years. So in May, it will be 4 years. I have had the proud privilege of being a parent. I was not a parent during my time of being an educator or a counselor, but I think if I had been a parent during that time, it may have changed the way I approached even some of my students or the way I approached conversations with parents. When you're a parent and then you're an educator at the same time, you kind of see both sides of that coin that I didn't necessarily think. I thought I had a good grasp on it, and then I became a parent and realized I knew absolutely nothing, which I feel like happens pretty frequently. So that's where you can find me. You can email me at Rochelle_Fink at Round Rock ISD, just like anybody else in the district. But you can also find me on Twitter, and I often post a lot of things on there that you might find helpful if you're a Twitter friend. Things that might be helpful for campuses, things are really great things that are happening in the district. But it's also a place for me to say, here's a really great resource that you might find helpful in there as well, and kind of continue this conversation. Because what you're going to find today is we're going to talk about a drop in the bucket of the entire continuum of everything that's happening in the district, because there is a lot happening around social and emotional learning this year. And it makes me really proud to say that we are really looking at social and emotional learning from a different perspective, and we'll talk about that in a second, but really looking at how do we empower students rather than try and fix students. Oftentimes you'll hear conversations that kids are broken or kids need to regulate or they need to be behaving a certain way, or SEL is all about behavior, when in fact we're looking at ways to empower students to have college and career readiness skills, to empower students to be able to manage big emotions and process through them when they come. In a second, I'll show you one tool that we use to do that. And one of the things we say is all of the feelings on that mood meter are 100% valid. We don't talk about good feelings or bad feelings. Feelings are just feelings. The way we respond to them and the way we react about them is where we have some conversations about appropriate coping strategies. But if you're mad right now, you are 100% justified in being mad. And I am not going to be the person that says, Rochelle, you really shouldn't be mad right now, because I do not walk in your shoes every day. And I don't know about you, but when someone says, I don't know why you're so mad right now, it actually makes you more mad. Rather than calming you down, it makes you more frustrated. And that's the same thing we want to avoid for our children. So before we get started, what I would like for you to do, if you can see these words, great. If you will pick a word to describe how you are feeling right now in this very moment, and if you will put it in the chat. If you can't see a word, if you will pick a color, whether it's red, yellow, blue, or green, and we will talk about this tool we use in a second. But for right now, for the 8 of us that are in the room, if you will just put that in the chat for me, please. How are you feeling today? Give me a color or a word. Sonia says green. Kelly says at ease. Sandra says grateful. Claudia says green. I see calm from Serpa. Yeah, so I see lots of us kind of over in this yellow and green phase. So one of the things that we have started this year district-wide in Round Rock ISD is a emotional check-in with our students every time we see them. So it may not be every single day, especially at our secondary campuses, but every time teachers see their students, there is an emotional check-in. And we use this very same mood meter. They're called either mood meters or pulse meters to do that. Now we have some that are more developmentally appropriate. For example, I would not give this to a kindergartner, but I may have taken these 4 in each quadrant and kind of broken them down, or I may have put an emoji face with it. Or I may have just put the big 4 emotions that we often start by teaching kids, which would be happy, calm, sad, and angry or mad, and use those as my starting point. And every day we ask kids, how you doing today? How are you doing right now? And what that does is it tells me for this group, we're feeling very pleasant emotions. It tells me as a person presenting to this group, I probably don't need to change much in what I'm doing. But if I were to have asked this question and I saw lots of frustrated or stressed or troubled or even embarrassed or lonely, I might have changed the way I approached this conversation, because those feelings are less pleasant. And the way that this mood meter works, this comes from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, which is one of the cornerstones of emotional intelligence work in the United States. And I would even say internationally at this point. But the way that this works is if we move horizontally across, as a former math teacher, as we move across the x-axis, or if we move horizontally, those feelings become more pleasant. So not necessarily good or bad, but I enjoy feeling excited more than I enjoy feeling restless. And I enjoy feeling restless more than I enjoy feeling livid. So as I move across, it's how much do I enjoy that feeling? And as I move from the bottom to the top across the entire continuum, my energy level goes up. So peaceful has the least amount of energy than secure or content. And content has less energy than cheerful. And cheerful has less energy than hyper or stressed. So no matter where I fall, this tells me as a teacher, even if I were to ask this question, and I got lots of kids that said, I'm feeling very hyper. Well, right now for me, that tells me I need to do something for them to get that energy out of their body, whether it's a movement exercise, it's something else that's happening that I need to kind of push pause on what I'm about to do something to help kiddos kind of get those feelings out of their body and come back to teaching content. So one of the things I tell teachers very regularly is if you don't take the time to do this when you realize that your kids are either really upset or they're high energy and we need to kind of regulate them for a second, when I'm trying to teach math, this is very much going to happen, right? How many times do you try and have a conversation with your child who is very excited about something and they are not listening to you? And you could be talking a foreign language and they would have no idea. The same thing happens with content. And so as we're looking at our kids, this is a really great tool for you to even use with your students. And so I, in this presentation, have linked different kinds of mood meters. I actually use something very similar to this with my 4-year-old. Hers has the 4 colors and the faces, so it has different emojis within them. And I just ask her, Addison, how you feeling today? Because that tells me, she can point or she can tell me, today I'm feeling happy or today I'm feeling sad. And it just gives her an opportunity, A, to put language with her feelings, because that's the number one thing we want kids to be able to do is to say, right now I'm feeling fill in the blank. Otherwise, oftentimes with early elementary, and I would even say middle school and high school students, if we don't give kids the vocabulary to adequately describe how they're feeling, this group, I can guarantee you, if I had just said, tell me how you're doing today, I would have gotten 3 words: fine, good, okay. Fine, good, okay. Which, friends, is not actually 3 emotions. It's just a state of being, right? So in giving you this vocabulary, I got really nuanced in how you felt. Sandra was able to tell me she felt grateful, which is a fantastic opportunity for me to say, tell me what you're feeling grateful for today. And she can have that dialogue with me. It gives me the opportunity to know that Claudia is feeling very relaxed. And so I want to make sure I create an environment where that feeling continues. And so at the end of this, I may check in with you again and see if we're in that same place. But taking in a normal day, this will take no more than 30 seconds. So the way we do this with our kids is they usually have a little dot or something that they can drag to where am I feeling today? And so they can drag it to nervous, and no one else sees that but their teacher. But as the teacher, I can look at it and see where my kids are very quickly. And if I want to give kids the opportunity to share, they have that opportunity. But I'm able to see as the teacher very quickly what that looks like for them. So this is a tool you can use within your own house. You can use it with your spouses. You can use it with family members. You can use it with coworkers. You may want to prep them beforehand instead of saying like, I have this mood meter, it's fantastic. People don't talk about emotions the way that I tend to talk about them. So I have to often prep people by saying, I'm going to start this conversation with just a check-in to see how you're doing. And this is often where I will lead them to. So this is another opportunity that are available for you if you are interested in it. It will be attached in this presentation as well. Before we get started, I know you all said you were very, you're feeling very good and very calm, but I would like for you to take a moment. I know it's been a really long day. I don't know about you, but Tuesday almost feels more Monday-ish than Monday sometimes. And I want you to take probably about 30 seconds. And if you will follow this graphic and breathe in for 4 seconds and breathe out for 4 seconds. You can leave your eyes open or closed, but I'm going to just be quiet for the next 30 seconds to give you an opportunity to breathe and to kind of bring yourself into this space. And so this is just one tool that we use with children every single day as well. So just like we have that mood meter in all of our classrooms that utilize what we call our relational roadmaps, we will start with that check-in exercise. In our upper elementary, middle school, and high school, we will also ask kids how stressed they are. So I want you, it's almost like a little temperature gauge. I want you to move that gauge. Tell me how stressed you are. And those are things like, I'm good. I don't have any stress. I'm rocking and rolling. I want to know those people because those are often the people that I'm like, I need to learn from you. To in the middle, I'm feeling a little stressed, but I can manage those feelings, to the very end of I'm incredibly overwhelmed. I don't know how to handle these expectations. I don't know what's required of me, because that tells me as their teacher, I need to check in with those kids. But also, if this is a student that day after day is continually having some of those big feelings, that's a referral to their school counselor that I need to make as an educator. And then we go straight into a breathing exercise to kind of get kids regulated, look at what's happening, because we're going to go from this right into teaching content. And I want to make sure you've had kind of the opportunity to kind of bring yourself into this space, look at everything that's happening and saying, okay, right now in this moment, how am I feeling? How can I kind of take care of anything else that may have happened? And I don't know about you, but even if I'm feeling pretty good, if I take 30 seconds to a minute to breathe, I am much more able to retain information as we go through the rest of my content that I would be teaching. So these are all different exercises. This is actually the one from today as well. But I have everything from donut breaths to, if you are an app user, there is an app called Calm that is really great for just some ambient noise too. If you want to use the online feature, you just pull it up and it kind of has like some white noise features. But at the same time, you can also have really great breathing exercises. There is what they call the emergency calm. So if you are in aisle 7 of HEB and your child is losing it, I don't know about you, but my 4-year-old, there are days where I'm like, where did this come from? Like, I gave you, like, you asked for Paw Patrol and mac and cheese, and I got Paw Patrol mac and cheese, and yet we're having a meltdown in aisle 7. Okay, but I can click on the emergency calm and it will give me a very immediate response for my child to kind of guide her through that breathing exercise. But the other thing that becomes really important is, in order for us to use coping strategies in an intentional, effective way, we have to pre-teach them, just like we teach math, just like we teach social studies, just like we teach reading, and we have to keep practicing them, just like we practice all of those other contents. I don't know about you, but no one taught me how to multiply one time and I was good. I had to learn it, and I had to practice 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 it before I took those darn multiplication tests. The same thing is true for emotional regulation skills. We have to teach the skill, but then we have to provide opportunity after opportunity after opportunity for students to utilize the skill and practice the skill before they actually need the skill, which is the tricky part. So that's why we start every single day with a breathing exercise, because when we do that, we are giving kids and creating those neurons in their brain that says, I'm feeling I have a skill to use. And we have lots of different fidgets, lots of different trinkets, lots of different things that we can give kids to help them regulate. But at the end of the day, no matter where you are at, your breath is always with you. And so you can very quickly calm anxiety and mute ruminating thoughts just through channeling your breath and kind of regulating the way you're breathing and becoming a much more intentional breather. And that will help you in a lot of cases. So we need to practice it in a variety of different ways. And so you'll see those every single day as well. These are also really great things that you can do with your kids, even before bed or in the morning, or before they leave for, like, I do it with my kiddo before I drop her off at daycare every morning. And then I tell her, like, Addison Gray, I need you to make good choices today. You're a fantastic kiddo. Let's make some good choices, and send her on her lovely little way. So one of the things I think that makes us a little bit different, actually, I'm going to stop right there. Does anybody have any questions before I jump into kind of our model as a district? If you have them, you can either drop them in the chat or in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Okay. So one of the things that you will hear a lot of is this idea of social and emotional learning. And in Round Rock ISD, we utilize the phrase social emotional learning, but we also use a health-based approach to social and emotional learning. And here's why. I learned calculus in college, right? I learned it. I'm a math major. I taught math. I learned 5 different kinds of calculus. I can't tell you in 14 years the last time I have been able to solve an integral equation. Or I can't tell you how I used calculus in college, but I can tell you I learned it. So there's this like, check the box, done, I learned it, moved on, tucked it behind, it's here. But when we use a health-based approach, I don't know about you, but I don't eat kale one time and suddenly I'm healthy. I have to continually practice, and I have to continually eat healthy foods, and I have to continually move my body in order to have a healthy lifestyle. And the same is very much true for social and emotional learning. As we become more self-aware and we uncover different layers of our, to use a Shrek term, as we uncover pieces of our onion, we discover different things about ourselves. And we might learn different characteristics, or we might learn different situations that make us feel a specific way. Or we might be in the middle of a global pandemic and the skills we used to have went completely out the window and we had to learn new ones. The same thing happens when we take a health-based approach. And so what you will see is, rather than teaching a skill or a concept one time, we are constantly interweaving social and emotional well-being throughout school climate and culture, the content that we are teaching students, the way people are showing up in those classrooms, how it integrates into our classroom and culture and our academic content, but also how do we engage parents and community into the fold of our classrooms and of our school community. And so in doing that, you will see kind of this definition. And it becomes a process. There will never be a time where you will hear me say, do these 5 things and you will reach the pinnacle of social and emotional well-being. Because friends, it doesn't exist. The pinnacle of social and emotional well-being does not exist. But we can teach kids strong social and emotional well-being, and we can teach kids strong social and emotional competencies, but it is ever evolving as kids mature, as they experience different environments, as their knowledge of themselves and the world around them encompasses and gets bigger. They're going to continually evolve those skills. For example, I was not a mindfulness person 3 years ago. I was that person that's like, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta move, I've got to be on the go and moving and grooving. But able to say, right now, I need to calm my mind. I am a recovering perfectionist, which would be, anybody that knows me knows that that's a shocker. But in order to calm my brain from all of the things, I realized I need to kind of be still sometimes. And so it is that everlasting process that teaches us more about ourselves. If I were to ask you to think about the person you were maybe 5 years ago, it's probably a little bit different than the person you are now. And the things that you might do to engage in healthy relationships might look a little bit different. The kinds of goals you're probably setting for yourself or working towards might be a little bit different. They might not. They might be exactly the same, and you're able to set those long-term goals. And so what you'll see is social and emotional learning is really a process that we teach kids to understand and manage their emotions. It's probably the biggest piece that we deal a lot with in our district. Set and achieve positive goals, a lot of those college and career readiness skills, those soft skills, how do we kind of become really good students is included in social emotional learning. Feeling and showing empathy for others. This is where a big conversation around equity and where groups of students fit within their classroom. Do they see mirrors of themselves? Do they see windows to the outside world? Very much falls into this space. Establishing and maintaining positive relationships, both friendship-based, and we do have a conversation around dating relationships when it becomes developmentally appropriate, and making responsible decisions. So giving kids tools that they can kind of problem solve and go through these different places with. Now, what you'll see is while we have a curriculum that we use to teach skills to students and to teach and reinforce concepts, you can probably pull out in English language arts, places where all of these things can come into play. Or you can look at math content and look at all of these places where they might be able to look at how do I make responsible, how do I problem solve effectively? How do I take a problem-based approach to a concept to achieve goals? All of those things are going to be incredibly important to look at what's coming ahead. So in Round Rock ISD, we follow this 5-prong model that I kind of previewed for you a little bit, but we're going to dive more deeply into each of them. So we take this 5-based approach that, in all disclosure, I will tell you is probably going to undergo an overhaul this year. This may be the last time that we actually use this model because we are looking at encompassing counseling services, behavioral health, families in transition, myself, all into a comprehensive model for what this will look like. But for us right now, we're really going to focus on what is the climate and culture of our school, of our classrooms, and of our environments. So looking at it from the individual classroom to the school at large, to even how do we integrate classrooms and communities together. This yellow box is our explicit instruction, which is really just saying, are we taking the time to teach skills the same way we teach math and the same way we teach reading, and that it holds the same weight in our content, that core content holds as well, that it doesn't get pushed aside because there's not enough time, that it is very much respected and used in the same format. And we use an instructional approach to behavior, to classroom management, and to proactive approaches to mental health that we'll unpack in a second. This light blue box is about our adult social emotional well-being, because we know that in order for our students to show up and our kids to be well and whole, the adults in the room need to do the same thing. And so we need to provide skills and opportunities for our adults in the room to experience and process through the exact same feelings. And this purple box that you see, the little notepad, is all about that academic integration. How do we take the skills that we're teaching in the explicit instruction and weave them into that content? How do we take the emotions that we're learning as a kindergartner and identify them when we're reading a book as a read aloud during our circle time? Those two connections help kids kind of take what I'm learning in one space, draw those neurotransmitters to another area of their brain, and really kind of pull it all together. And these two cogs that I feel like are probably the most important is family, parents, family, and community partnerships, because we couldn't do school without each of you. And you are just as important as the children that we are lucky that you send us every single day. And we know that in order for social emotional learning to be truly effective, we need to be viewed as partners rather than transfers of information. We are truly working together as a collaborative partnership between parents, families, educators, and the general community, because we know the old adage, it takes a village, comes into play every single day. And I would even say, especially now more than ever, as we are looking at education in the 21st century in a global pandemic, has kind of changed a lot of that for us and brought this to light. So you'll hear us talk about a lot of these 5 different things. When we talk about social emotional learning, you will talk about each of these components, but do not be surprised if we have a conversation at a later date about social emotional behavioral health that kind of combines all of these things that are working in tandem in the district into a cohesive model. So we're going to spend some time talking intentionally about relationships. But before I do that, I want to stop and see, does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any comments? You can either put them in the chat, you can put them in the Q&A document, or if you have any questions that you want to ask aloud, we can go from there. So I'll give you a little bit of time. Okay. Then, how we feel in a classroom is just as important, if not more important, than what is being taught. I want to let that sink in for a second, and then I'm going to ask you a question. How you feel in a classroom is just as important, if not more, than what is being taught. So I want you to think about your favorite teacher, or the teacher that made the biggest impact on you today. And I want you to picture that person in your mind. And now in the chat, if I can get 3 brave individuals to tell me, why was this teacher so impactful? Okay, 3 people to do that for me, please. I think for me, whenever I have this conversation, I talk about Mr. Bruce Stoltzfus, who was my 8th grade math teacher. So it shouldn't shock anybody that I taught math because of his influence in my life. But he saw in me a powerful opportunity that I never saw in myself. And he allowed me to kind of be in a bigger space than I ever wanted to be. You tell him all the time, he kind of honestly saved my life in a lot of ways. Sonia says they were connected on a personal level outside of class. Jonathan said his teacher cared. Sirpa says, one of my girls had a wonderful 1st grade teacher. She was understanding, warm, caring, and consistent in every situation. So of these 3 people, thank you so much, Sonia, Jonathan, and Sirpa. Not one of them said they knew math really, really well, or they knew social studies left, right, and center, which our teachers need to know their content, right? We want teachers who are academic experts, but I also need you to enjoy being in their space. And I need you as a student to feel like you can show up in your classroom and it is a safe environment for you to be in, and to feel like you are a valued individual within that classroom community, because around you are 12, 15, 18, 30 other kids, and I need you to feel that you are just as important as every other child in that classroom. And we do that through intentional planning for relationship building every single day. So relationships are at the center of every successful classroom, regardless of what you teach, what grade level, or teacher experience. I don't care if you are a pre-K teacher or you are a senior AP chemistry teacher. Relationships will get you everywhere. And you've probably seen this with your own children, right? When they have a teacher that gets them, or they have a teacher that makes them feel special, they come alive. And they'll probably work just as hard, if not harder, for that teacher because they feel like they have value. So one of the biggest things I tell teachers all the time is, at the end of the day, I want your kids to feel 3 things: heard, valued, and understood. If you can get kids to feel those 3 things, you have won the battle. Parents, I will tell you, the same thing happens every time you're trying to have a difficult conversation with your kids. If you can help your children, even if it's a conversation that is hard, that they are not going to like what you have to say, if you can hear them out and allow them to feel heard, valued, and understood, even if they still have to hear no, feeling those three things makes the no sting a little bit less. And so that looks like things like listening with intention. Rather than listening to respond, you give them an opportunity to tell you whatever it is that they need to tell you. And we listen first and then respond. Or we might reflect what they're saying, and we might say, what I hear you saying is fill in the blank. Or it sounds like you're really frustrated. In doing that, we have met that, heard piece. We have met that piece where they feel, yeah, mom kind of gets how I'm feeling right now. She's still not happy with me, but right now she gets it. And that's the first key to helping children process through any big emotion that they might be experiencing. And so in Round Rock ISD, we provide access to training in a variety of different tools to do that. Some of the biggest things we do are things like restorative practices, proactive classroom management techniques. Every teacher in Round Rock ISD is expected to utilize proactive classroom management techniques in the classroom, which means we have provided opportunities to teach and reinforce expectations and coach students through what we want to see. Rather than, so for example, at the elementary level, I often use the example of telling kids, don't run, right? Don't run, or stop running is one that I use. Even as a teacher, I used to scream it all the time. What else could you do in the hallway besides not running? I could skip. I could jump. If I'm a squirrely 4th grade student, which I was, I might crab walk. But what I really want is for you to use walking feet. So I might change my expectation to walking feet, please. Now, as a kid, I know exactly what you want from me. I know in order to be following expectations, I need to be using walking feet, which means I can't jump, I can't skip, I can't use I can't use crab feet. I have to walk the way that you've asked me to walk. Or it might mean if I'm using trauma-informed classroom strategies, I am giving you the space to regulate your emotions, but I'm still coaching you through what that might look like. So it might sound like, you sound really frustrated right now. Would you like to get a drink of water? Or you sound really frustrated right now. Can I come back and help you in a minute? And when I meet you where you're at, I'm not forcing kids into like forcing a square peg into a round hole. I'm still holding them to really high expectations, but rather than holding the bar up here and saying, jump, meet my expectations, I am helping them rise to that occasion in a safe and supportive learning environment. And those self-guided reflections are incredibly important because that allows me the opportunity to give kids that opportunity for self-growth. And so through those reflections is where that kind of those new neurotransmitters are being created, where kids have the opportunity to say, right now, this is how I'm feeling. This is how I move forward. And so these are things that you will see at play in campuses across Round Rock ISD. One of the things that I am working with behavioral health and other departments in the district is providing some resources for you as parents to utilize some of these same structures. So I actually did a training probably in November that I can link as well to this presentation on coaching elementary and middle school students through emotional intelligence. So if you have young kids like I do, how do you coach them through a meltdown in a way that's still supportive and helps them feel heard, valued, and understood? For your middle school students, how do you coach them through a time where, I don't know about you, but middle school students don't think mom and dad are pretty cool. It might be the exact opposite in a lot of ways. So how do you provide that space where when they are ready, they will come to you? But for the most part, they still kind of are going to go to their peers, but they feel that connection is still there and that door is still left open for you. And so what you'll see in terms of what we're teaching, we talked about how, that's a lot of that climate and culture piece. If we look at the explicit instruction piece, we're really looking at these 5 things. We're looking at CASEL's 5 core competencies. And CASEL is the collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning. It's kind of like the PBS or KXAN of social and emotional learning. They house everything that has been really, what does really good social and emotional learning look like? We go to the CASEL framework. And so you'll hear them talk about things like self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills, which if I were to go back to that definition, are these 5 things. But I think the thing that's so incredibly important and why this model is the one that we have chosen is because if you look at it, it's not just how it fits in the classroom. And it's not just how it fits in the school, it's how it fits throughout the entire working web of all the things, whether it's classrooms, schools, families and caregivers, but also our community, understanding that we have to have partnerships throughout the entire village for our kids to be successful, and that you are going to pick up different things throughout the course of these 5 components in different environments based on where you're at. You'll learn more things about yourself when you experience different kinds of setbacks or different successes in these different places. And you'll kind of continue to grow your that puzzle piece of who you are, if you will. And so ways we support student regulation, we talked about, are things like we're going to teach the skills. I'm going to teach breathing exercises. I'm going to teach some hand manipulation if a kid is really frustrated, or if they have some of those high energy, less pleasant emotions. Oftentimes, if I can give them something to feel, I can help them regulate. But I need to teach that before I ask them to use it. And so I'm going to teach that in a proactive way. I'm also going to teach them how to recognize what different emotions look like for them in their body. For example, we might have them reflect on, when you feel angry, what happens? And for me, I would tell you my ears get tingly. Or I kind of feel, I get surprised. I get really red. And so I can kind of feel it start to come. When I do that, I can then pre-think through, when this is happening, what do I need to do? Not telling kids don't feel the way you need to feel. I want them to feel angry, because in fact, feeling angry can give them the power to speak up when they need to. But I want them to be able to do it in a way that is respectful, in a way that is not harming themselves or anybody else, but also in a way that allows them to speak what they need to speak and get the resources that they need to get. So we teach the skills, then we process the skills, and then we coach the skills when they're needed. And so that continuum allows us this comprehensive view of what this needs to look like for us as individuals. And just like we talked about in doing this, social emotional learning is a proactive mental health support. We know that right now, student anxiety and depression is the highest it's been in a very long time. But we also know that it was high to begin with since 2017 when we started measuring these skills in terms of Round Rock ISD. So we have been very intentional about creating a space where we can provide some proactive approaches. We can't wait for a student to be in crisis to teach these skills. We can't wait for a student to be in crisis to say, here is how you regulate. Or when you're in crisis, let's have a conversation, because no one wants to have a conversation when you are dysregulated. It's kind of like the old adage, like no one in the history of calming down has ever calmed down by being told to calm down. The same thing happens here. If we can utilize proactive mental health supports, teaching regulation or teaching coping strategies, providing students an opportunity to be connected to one caring adult, If I, as a student, feel connected to one caring adult outside of my classroom or outside of my home, my rate of suicide drops by 65%. And that in and of itself, friends, is the number one reason why I will always stand by this model for us as a district. We have to look at social and emotional learning as a health-based approach to mental health structures. Giving students an opportunity to feel connected to one, it takes one adult outside of their home to drop the rate of suicide if they're having suicidal thoughts. One out of all the adults in our space. At the same time, if I can provide students with these strategies and I can provide them opportunities to look at how am I feeling? How do I manage that feeling? Rather than experiencing mental health crises, we may be able to get ahead of it before it becomes a crisis and refer to teachers and have teachers refer to counselors. We may be able to provide systems and structures in place to provide access to concepts before our students actually are in crisis, which is the goal for a lot of our work. So that was kind of my soapbox for the day, and I apologize for that. But this is a place in which I you can hear, I get very fired up about supporting student mental health in a lot of cases. Because what we're finding with a lot of our kids is they are ready to talk about their mental health concerns and their mental health needs. They are ready to have these conversations. The stigma around having the conversations is not as prevalent with them as it is maybe for my generation, where you didn't talk about it. Not everyone wants to talk about mental health in the same way that I want to talk about mental health. I don't walk into a cocktail party and say, how are you feeling today? And really want to hear their conversation, or to really want to hear somebody say like, I'm feeling really depressed. And then giving them the space to kind of talk through that. Most of the time when we go to a cocktail party and someone says, how you doing? You get those three, right? Fine, okay, or good. But for a lot of our kids, they are ready to have these conversations. And so providing a space where they feel safe to do so in a way that allows us to support that conversation may actually be the way forward for us as a nation to kind of destigmatize the conversation around mental health. And so in Round Rock ISD, ways that we can't have a conversation around regulation is a curriculum called Second Step. We use their curriculum pre-K through grades 8 on the majority of our campuses. This year, in terms of elementaries, we are on 30 of 35 elementaries, every single pre-K classroom, and 10 of our 11 middle schools, plus the Opportunity Center when students are attending the DAEP. You saw we use mindfulness techniques at the very beginning of every day, and I have encouraged teachers, especially this year in the virtual environment, to create mindfulness breaks as a brain break throughout the day. So it might be in the middle of a reading exercise, or before they go from reading to math, their transition is a breathing exercise or a yoga exercise from Go Noodle, or something to get kids either moving or just utilizing it in a different way. We provide resources for staff to be aware of their own social emotional well-being, but then also integrating this into the curriculum itself. Providing questions that teachers might ask for when they're doing read alouds to integrate emotional well-being, to ask if you were in this situation, how would you handle this scenario? Allowing, kids to take the things they're learning in that second step content and apply it in the academic setting. So it becomes more than just this thing I do in a vacuum, but it's really woven throughout my entire school process, and I can see it in a lot of different places. Let me go back. All right. I think I talked really fast, and I apologize because I have a lot of time. So we have lots of times for you to ask questions, for you to get some feedback, for you to, I would even welcome some feedback from you on how you feel like things are going for you with your kids. If you want to put them in the chat, if you want to drop them in the Q&A, if you want to hang around for a little bit, I will be here for a while. If you have questions, comments, if you just want to hang out for a little bit, I am welcoming any of that. So I hope you have a great day. I will hang out here if you've got any questions. Kelly's going to help me kind of facilitate those. But anything you've got, you can either drop them in the chat or in the Q&A feature. All right, friends. I will hang out here if you have any questions, but if you are done for the day, one of the things I want to say to you as I close for you for the day is thank you. I appreciate you. And Sonia, I see your question. I'll answer it here in a second. I appreciate that you took the time out of your day. I know the evenings can be really stressful for us as parents. And so for you to take the time to be here in community with us, says a lot, and says a lot that you value this piece for your children. And I just want to say thank you. As parents in Round Rock ISD, I think you're doing a fantastic job. And I can't thank you every day for sending us your greatest gift and trusting us with your children every single day. So thank you for that. Sonia says, how do we help siblings be more emotionally open with one another? And I think the biggest way you do that is through modeling. And I think if you are able to be emotionally open with your children, it will just kind of become the vocabulary that they use. So that might look like putting language to what you're seeing them feeling. Like right now, I see you're feeling very excited, or, oh, you're feeling very determined. But also if you, I don't know about you, but I'm not a perfect parent, right? Like I have moments where I lose my mind sometimes, but to go back and say, you know what, I'm really sorry. I got really frustrated and I responded, I got really frustrated and I just didn't feel X, Y, or Z. How, like next time I do that, I want you to work and kind of give them that space. I think as you're able to model that, like I said, it just kind of becomes part of the conversation and they're able to do that as well. But I also would encourage to look at the relationship that they have with one another. As kids are little, it's not uncommon for them to not feel, I don't want to say not feel safe, but to not feel like they can, right? Like sisters tend to fight more when they're little than as opposed to maybe when they get a little bit older. And that's because they know the ins and outs of everything about that kid. And so there might be this place of like, I can't tell you that I'm feeling fill in the blank because you have hurt me in the past. And so I think if you can kind of model that for kids and just say like, we are in a safe space right now, allows us the opportunity to kind of provide that space for our kids. But I think modeling is the number one thing that parents can do to help their kids kind of embrace that emotional vocabulary and start to use it. All right, so I got a question in the Q&A. It says, my upper elementary aged kid is a perfectionist and struggles with asynchronous work as he can't decide what is good enough. How can I help? And I see this a lot. And I feel like I get this question a lot this year more than any other year. And I totally get it. Right. As I said at the very beginning, I am a recovering perfectionist. And if you are an Enneagram studier, I am an Enneagram 1, which means I am all things perfectionism. So I think as you're helping your kid, a couple of the things that you can do. One is help them kind of map out, like if they need to have a project and they need to kind of look at different structures or things that need to happen, allow them to say like, first I need to do this task, then I need to do this task, then I need to do this task. And often that might be on a Post-it, right? So rather than having, this is an often example that I use, rather than having a full notebook full of a to-do list, you put it on a Post-it note. Then I have to really narrow down what are the 3 to 5 things that I'm going to do right now. And at the end of that time, whatever is done is what I submit. But I also think having a conversation with your child's teacher around what are they expecting. Yes, it's asynchronous, but oftentimes we know our teachers, and when there's usually some kind of a rubric or something that you might be able to help them coach through. Often as a perfectionist, especially with our upper elementary age kids that want to please, because often our perfectionists are also our people pleasers. There's this struggle between, I don't want to disappoint parent, teacher, myself, my friends, fill in the blank. So I'm going to keep working, and then I'm just not going to turn it in because either it's not good enough, or I'm still working on it and it's not done. And so I think if you can kind of set a timer, I want you to work on this for 30 minutes, or I want you to work on it in an hour, and we're going to submit whatever is done, or I want you to take a break from it and come back to it, and kind of give them that space away. I would say if you set a timer and come back to it, the easiest thing to do would be to take, I wouldn't set a timer for 30 minutes, go away and come back to that same task, but maybe that task gets moved to the afternoon, or that task gets moved to the next day if it can, if it's an ongoing project. But to kind of provide some of that mental space can help in that perfectionism as well. But that's a really great question. I think with kids, that people-pleasing mentality is what is driving a lot of that perfectionism for a lot of our kids right now. What other questions do you guys have? All right, guys. Well, like I said, I will hang out here. If you want to hop off and go hang out with your kids for the day, like I said, I am so thankful that you decided to come hang out with us today. Anytime that I get to talk to parents is a true gift for me, because I feel like you are sending us, like I said, you're sending us your greatest kids every single day. And we truly have the best kids in Round Rock ISD. And I believe we have the best parents in Round Rock ISD as well. So thank you every single day for the work that you do. Bye, guys.